35,000 years ago, when the world was ruled by ice and famine, when every breath could be the last, when caves were both fortresses and tombs, a man awoke alone one brutal winter morning and realized something terrible. He was the last one. His name was Tarak. He had lived through 26 winters, his body scarred by hunts that nearly killed him, and his eyes had seen his entire tribe, 47 people, including his wife and 2-year-old son, decimated by black fever in just 10 days. He survived. Not because he was strong, not because he was special, by sheer, inexplicable, cruel luck. And now he was alone, completely alone, in a world where being alone was a death sentence. This is not the story of how he gave up. It is the story of how he refused to die, of how a man who only knew how to hunt learned something impossible, not only to survive, but to dominate, and how, in the process, he transformed from a simple cave hunter into the first human to truly understand the language of beasts and become their lord. But before becoming a legend, he needed to survive the first week, and that, alone, seemed more impossible than resurrecting the dead. The cave where Tarak awoke smelled of death. Not the old death that turns to dust, but the recent death that still stinks, that still clings to the throat, that still whispers the names of those you loved. The bodies were piled up in the deepest part of the cave, covered with stones, as was the custom, but there were so many that the stones couldn't reach them all. His wife, Lira, was among them. Black hair that once shone was now dull and dirty. Skin that was once warm was now cold as winter ice. And beside her, too small to be dead, their son, Oren, who had only begun to speak 2 moons before, who called his father Tata and laughed when Tarak threw him into the air. Tarak couldn't bring himself to put stones on them. Not yet. He lay there, on his knees, his hands trembling not from cold but from something worse, the certainty that it should have been him. He should have died. Why did the fever spare him? Why did it take the 2-year-old boy and leave the 26-year-old man? Why? He shouted at the stone ceiling of the cave. Why me? No answer. Only echo. And the echo sounded like mockery. But then, something pulled him back. Hunger. His stomach rumbled violently, achingly. He hadn't eaten for 3 days, tending to the sick, trying to lower fevers with cold water, trying to stop the dead from dying. And now he was alone, without food, without a tribe, without purpose. He had 2 choices: lie down beside Lira and Oren and wait for death to come for him too, or get up, leave the cave, and attempt the impossible. Survive alone. It took him 5 minutes of absolute silence to decide, 5 minutes gazing at his son's face. And then Tarak did something that seemed like betrayal. He chose to live. He stood up, picked up his spear, a hard wooden shaft with a chipped flint tip, and left the cave of the dead for the world of the living. And he swore aloud to the gods who did not answer, "I will survive. I don't know how, but I will. And when I die, it won't be lying down. It will be standing, fighting."
Winter in prehistory wasn't just cold. It was deliberate murder. Snow covered everything up to his knees. The wind cut through skin like blades of ice, and the trees, bare and twisted, looked like dead fingers scratching at the gray sky. Tarak walked for hours, searching for any sign of life: animal tracks, trees with fruit, running water. He found only white silence and growing hunger. His stomach ached as if it had teeth inside, biting. At dusk, as the weak sun began to die, he heard something, a low growl. It wasn't a wolf. Wolves growled higher. It wasn't a bear. Bears growled deeper. It was something different. He followed the sound carefully, spear raised, treading lightly so as not to alert whatever was there. And he found it. A she-wolf, trapped in a natural snare, a crevice between two rocks where she had fallen and become wedged. It wasn't a human trap. It was nature's cruelty. The she-wolf saw him and growled, but it was a weak growl. She had been there for days, without food, without water, without hope. Beside her, still inside the crevice, but dying of hunger and cold, were two small pups, no more than a few weeks old. Tarak calculated quickly. A trapped she-wolf equals easy prey. Just one well-placed spear and he would have food for 3 days, maybe 4. He raised his spear, aimed at the neck where the jugular pulsed, and he stopped. Because he saw something in the she-wolf's eyes, not hatred, not hunger, despair. The same despair he felt when he woke up alone. The despair of someone who has lost everything and yet doesn't want to die. "You are alone too," Tarak whispered, lowering his spear. "You lost your pack, you lost your pups. Only you remain." The she-wolf stopped growling. She looked at him with something that seemed recognition, as if she understood, as if he knew that this thin, broken human was also a survivor, not a predator. Tarak took 3 steps back and sat in the snow, still holding his spear, but no longer pointing it. He stood there, watching the she-wolf, thinking. He had 2 choices again: kill and eat, survive a few more days, or try something no human had ever tried: save. "You're crazy, Tarak," he said to himself aloud. "She's a beast. She'll kill you as soon as she gets out. You know that." But a voice inside him, perhaps Lira's voice, perhaps the voice of guilt for being alive, answered, "What if I don't kill her? What if she's like you, just wanting to live?" He stood up. He approached slowly, hands in sight, spear sheathed on his back. The she-wolf tensed, but had nowhere to go. She was trapped, vulnerable. Tarak began digging the snow around the crevice with his bare hands. The cold burned his fingers, but he continued. He dug for almost an hour, widening the opening, removing small stones, until finally the she-wolf managed to move. She emerged, staggering, too weak to attack even if she wanted to. She fell onto the snow, panting. Tarak took 10 steps back, giving her space. For a long minute, she-wolf and human stared at each other. 2 survivors, 2 last of their tribes, 2 who should have been dead but stubbornly remained alive. Then Tarak did something insane. He took a small piece of dried meat from his leather pouch, the last scrap of food he had, saved since before the fever, and he threw it onto the snow between them. The she-wolf sniffed, looked at him, looked at the meat, and ate. When she finished, she didn't run away. She stayed there, lying in the snow, watching the human with eyes that were no longer those of a wild beast. They were eyes of something new, something that didn't yet have a name. "I don't know what I'm doing," Tarak said, laughing at himself. A joyless laugh. "But if I'm going to die alone, at least I won't die killing. I'll die trying something different."
That night, Tarak built a small fire 100 paces from the cave of the dead. He couldn't sleep inside. The she-wolf, surprisingly, didn't run away. She stayed 20 paces away, lying in the snow, watching the fire with curiosity mixed with instinctive fear. Tarak divided the last piece of dry root he had found, half for himself, half thrown toward the she-wolf. She ate slowly, never taking her eyes off him. When the night's cold reached the point of biting bones, when the fire died down and Tarak began to tremble uncontrollably, the she-wolf did something unexpected. She approached. Not too close. She still kept a safe distance of 10 paces, but she approached. And Tarak understood. She was cold too. She was alone too.
and against death by freezing, old enmities between species seemed less important. He threw more wood on the fire. The she-wolf lay down a little closer, and for the first time in 10 days, Tarak slept without dreaming of black fever. He dreamed of something different, of a pack that wasn't made up of humans or wolves. It was made up of survivors. When he awoke at dawn, the she-wolf was still there, and Tarak knew he had just done something that would change everything. He hadn't killed, he had saved. And in saving, he had created the first bond between human and beast that wasn't based on fear, but on mutual respect. He didn't know it yet, but he had just planted the seed of domestication, and in time, that she-wolf wouldn't just be a companion, she would be a teacher. Because she knew secrets of hunting, survival, and teamwork that no human alone could ever learn. Tarak had started as the last survivor, but he was about to become something more. The first hunter who didn't hunt only with a spear, but with 4-legged allies. The first to understand that power doesn't come from killing everything. It comes from knowing when to save. The journey to becoming Lord of the Beasts had begun, and it began not with dominion, but with compassion. For the next 3 days, Tarak and the she-wolf, whom he began to call Shadow because of how silently she moved like darkness, established a strange routine. It wasn't friendship, not yet. It was something more primal, cooperation born of necessity. Tarak hunted during the day, or tried to. Alone, with only a spear, getting meat was nearly impossible. Deer were too fast, wild boars were too aggressive, and mammoths, well, mammoths could only be hunted by groups of 10 or more men. He only managed to get small prey, skinny hares, the occasional squirrel, eggs stolen from nests when he was lucky. Barely enough to keep 1 man alive, let alone 2, him and Shadow. But then, on the 4th day, something changed. Tarak was chasing a young deer, trying to approach from behind, when the animal noticed and bolted. Tarak ran, but he knew it was useless. No human catches a deer in a straight run. He was about to give up when he saw Shadow emerged from the bushes to the left, cutting off the deer's path. The startled animal turned sharply to the right where Tarak was. It wasn't planned, it wasn't arranged, but it worked. Tarak threw. The spear flew and struck the neck. The deer fell, trembled, and died. For the first time in 2 weeks, Tarak had real meat. And for the first time, he realized something revolutionary. 2 hunters, even of different species, were infinitely better than 1. He cleaned the deer, separated half the meat, and threw it to Shadow. She ate voraciously, but when she finished, she did something unexpected. She approached Tarak, now only 5 steps away, and sat down. Just sat, looking. It wasn't a threat. It was recognition. It was the beginning of something humans 1,000 generations later would call loyalty.
He would strike the ground with his spear twice and start walking, and she would follow. When she wanted him to stop, she would plant herself in the path and rustle softly, and he would stop. It was rudimentary. It was instinctive, but it was communication. And with communication came infinite possibilities. One morning, Shadow woke him with an urgent bark. Not a threatening growl, but a warning bark. Tarak picked up his spear and followed her. She led him to a trail where enormous footprints marked the snow. cave bear footprints. The bear had passed a few hours earlier, heading towards the Cave of the Dead, where Tarak still kept tools and hides. If the bear went in there, it would destroy everything. Shadow didn't need to say anything. His whole body screamed, "Danger! We need to go, now!" And Tarak understood. For the first time in history, human and canine were not only hunting together, but communicating danger, planning responses, being a team. They managed to drive the bear away using fire and coordinated shouts. Tarak shouting from the front, Sombra growling from the flanks, making the furry giant decide that this territory wasn't worth fighting. That night, Sombra slept just 3 steps from Tarak. The distance was decreasing, the trust growing. 2 moons after the encounter with Sombra, when Tarak already considered the she-wolf not just an ally, but a companion, visitors appeared. They were 5 humans, 3 men, 2 women, from a northern tribe. Thin, dirty, with eyes that had seen recent famine. Their leader, a man with long hair and a tangled beard, introduced himself as Yorick. "We saw smoke from your campfire," said Yorick, keeping a respectful distance. "We thought there was no one left in this region. The Black Fever took many." "He took everyone from my tribe," Tarak replied, his voice still heavy with pain. "I'm the only one left." "Then you're like us," said the woman, a young green-eyed girl named Nara. "Survivors of destroyed tribes. We band together so we don't die alone." "You're not alone," Nara interrupted, pointing. "Look." Shadow had appeared among the trees, silent as always. The 5 visitors stepped back, hands on their spears. "Wolf!" shouted one of the men. "Let's kill it." "No!" Tarak placed himself between them and Shadow, spear raised. "She's mine. She's not a beast. She's a companion." "Are you crazy?" Yorick looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "Wolves aren't companions. They're competitors. They kill sheep. They steal game. They're enemies." "She saved me," Tarak said firmly. "We hunt together. She warns me of danger. I feed her. We're a team." The 5 exchanged incredulous glances. Nara stepped forward, curious. "How?" Tarak showed them. He struck the spear on the ground twice. Shadow approached and sat beside him, her eyes attentive, but not aggressive. Tarak placed his hand on top of her head, a gesture that had taken him weeks to master without being bitten. "She understands," Tarak explained. "Not like humans understand, but she understands intention. She understands cooperation. And if one wolf can learn, others can. And if others can," he looked at the visitors, "then perhaps humans don't need to be alone. Not just with humans, but with allies who have 4 paws." Yorick was silent for a long time. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "You're crazy, Tarak, but maybe the right kind of crazy." He proposed something. His small tribe of survivors was struggling to stay alive. Hunting was difficult, cold was deadly, and larger, more organized tribes were beginning to drive small groups out of good territory. "We need an advantage," Yorick said. "And if what you have with that wolf, if it can be taught, if it can be replicated, that's an advantage." "It's not that wolf," Tarak corrected. "It's Shadow, and she's not a tool. She's a partner." "A partner," then, Yorick agreed. "The question is, can you teach others to have partners like that?" Tarak looked at Shadow. The she-wolf looked back at him. And in that moment of silent connection, he understood something profound. He wasn't just saving himself. He was discovering something that would change all of humanity. "I can try, but it has to be done the right way. It can't be domination. It has to be respect. It has to be a choice for both sides." Nara approached slowly, her hand outstretched but not touching. "She doesn't bite?" "Only if you give her a reason," Tarak replied. "Show that you're not a threat. Show empty hands. Show calm." Nara did so. Sombra sniffed her hand, considered it, and then, to everyone's shock, licked her fingers. Nara laughed, surprised and amazed. She's different. Because she was chosen out of necessity, not captured by force. There's a difference. In the following days, Yorick and his small group camped near Tarak, and he began to teach the impossible: how to approach wolves without being attacked, how to offer food without appearing weak, how to read body language, how to build trust. It wasn't easy. One of the men, impatient, tried to grab a young wolf that approached. He was bitten and almost lost 2 fingers. Tarak healed him with herbs and scolded him. Force doesn't work, only patience. But Nara had a talent. She sat quietly for hours, just watching. She left food, she didn't force it. And slowly a young wolf, a male with grayish fur and golden eyes, began to approach her. It took 3 weeks, but in the end, the wolf ate from her hand, and Nara, with tears of joy, whispered, "I had a family. I lost it. Now I have it again." Tarak understood then. He wasn't just taming wolves. He was healing broken humans. Because when you care for something that needs you, when something chooses you back, when you've built a bond based on respect, you remember what it is to be part of something bigger. One night around the campfire, Yorick asked, "What do you call what we're doing?" Tarak looked around. 4 humans, 2 she-wolves, Shadow and Nara's mate, a shared fire, divided meat. "I think we're building a pack, not just of wolves, not just of humans, a mixed pack, where everyone hunts, everyone eats, and everyone protects everyone." "Pack," Nara repeated, smiling. "I like it." And that night, under cold, witnessing stars, not just an alliance between species was born. A concept was born that future generations would call a chosen family. A family that doesn't come from blood, but from choice, from necessity, from mutual respect. Tarak had started as the last survivor. Now he was the leader of something new. Not a tribe of humans, not a wolf pack, but a fusion of the two. And with that fusion would come power that no pure group would ever have. The journey to become Lord of the Beasts continued. And it was only beginning.
6 moons had passed since Tarak found Shadow. What began as a desperate alliance between a man and a she-wolf had transformed into something greater. A community of 11 humans and 7 wolves living, hunting, and surviving together. The Cave of the Dead had been abandoned. Tarak had finally managed to cover all the bodies with stones and make peace with the past. The group now lived in a series of makeshift shelters built in a protected clearing, surrounded by dense trees that blocked the biting wind. The hunts were different now. No more lone men chasing impossible prey. It was coordination. Humans flanked from the right, wolves from the left. When prey ran, it was pushed into natural traps, narrow ravines, deep snow, frozen riverbanks where there was nowhere to escape. In a single coordinated hunt, they managed to bring down a giant elk, an animal that fed the entire pack for 10 days. It was an abundance none of them had known in years. But with success came stares. Neighboring tribes began to hear about the wolf pack, humans who hunted with wild animals by their side. Some came with curiosity, others with suspicion. And one day, they came with hostility. They were 12 men, all experienced warriors, led by a giant named Brun. 2 meters tall, shoulders as broad as a bison, scars crisscrossing his face like maps of battles won. His tribe was known as the Wolf Hunters because they had brutal customs. They killed wolves for sport, hung their skins as trophies, and wore their teeth as status symbols. Brun arrived arrogantly, planted his spear in the ground at the entrance to the clearing, and shouted, "Tarak, the coward who lives with animals, show your face." Tarak emerged from his shelter, Shadow beside him, 2 other she-wolves flanking him. Yorick and the other humans positioned themselves behind him, spears in hand,
but not yet raised. "I am Tarak. What do you want?" Brun spat on the ground. "I want you to stop this abomination. Wolves aren't companions. They're a plague. They compete for our prey, threaten our children, kill our livestock when we domesticate them." "Not these wolves," Tarak replied calmly. "These hunt with us, not against us. They don't attack humans. They only protect the pack." "Pack?" laughed Brun, a cruel laugh. "You call this shame a pack? Humans who stoop to walking with beasts? That's not evolution, Tarak. It's regression." "It's survival," said Nara, stepping forward, her wolf, now called Gray, growling softly beside her. "Since we joined Tarak, we haven't gone hungry. We haven't lost anyone to predators. We haven't died of cold because we hunt enough to have extra pelts. You call it shame. We call it wisdom." Brun pointed at Shadow. "That she-wolf. Has she killed humans?" "No," Tarak replied. "Lies. All wolves kill humans. It's in their nature." "Then you don't understand nature," said Tarak, stepping forward fearlessly. "Wolves kill when they are hungry or threatened, not for pleasure, not for sport, unlike some humans I know." The veiled insult did not go unnoticed, but Brun's men tensed, but the leader only smiled. "I came with a warning, not with war, but I can return with both. Drive those beasts away. Kill them. Go back to being a real human, or you'll have trouble, big trouble." "I'm not going to kill my family," said Tarak, his voice firm as stone. "And if you return with war, you'll discover that humans with wolves are far more dangerous than humans alone." Brun spat again and turned away. "I'll be back, Tarak, and when I return, I'll bring 30 men, and we'll see if your pets can stop this."
Jorek looked at Tarak with concern. "He'll be back, and with 30 warriors? We're 11, even with the wolves." "The wolves make a difference," Tarak interrupted. "But you're right. It's not enough to have numbers. We need strategy." They spent the next few days preparing. Not fortifications. Prehistoric humans didn't build walls, but traps. Burrows covered with thin branches and snow, hiding deep holes. Logs tied to trees that could be released to roll downhill. And most importantly, they trained coordination. Tarak taught the wolves to respond to specific signals. A long whistle meant surround. 2 short whistles meant attack. 3 quick whistles meant retreat. It wasn't perfect. Wolves weren't soldiers, but it was better than nothing. And then Tarak did something no one expected. He left the clearing alone, with Shadow, and spent 3 days searching for something specific: other wolf packs. He found 2, and he did something impossible. He negotiated. Not with words, of course, with meat. He took carcasses of game, left them on the borders of other packs' territories, and waited. When the wolves came to investigate, he didn't attack. He only observed. And slowly, with the patience of weeks condensed into days, he established that he was not an enemy. He couldn't domesticate them. That would take months. But he achieved something simpler. He made them recognize him as non-prey and non-threat. And he planted seeds of future cooperation. When he returned, Jorek asked, "What did you do?" Tarak replied with a tired smile, "I recruited reinforcements. If Brun comes with 30 men, he'll discover that it's not just our pack protecting this territory. There are 3 packs, and wild wolves don't like invaders." Brun returned, as promised, but he didn't bring 30, he brought 40 men. All warriors, all armed with spears, clubs, and flint knives. They came with the arrogance of those who know that numbers crush everything. They arrived at dusk, when the sunlight was already weak. Brun shouted, "Last chance, Tarak! Hand over the wolves, and I'll let you live." Tarak went out, alone,
to the center of the clearing, Shadow beside him, as always. There will be no surrender, only choice. Leave now, or you'll find out what happens when we challenge a pack. Pack? Brune laughed. I see 11 frightened humans and 7 animals. We're 40. No, said Tarak calmly. We are more. He whistled, one long, two short, and the world exploded in motion. From the trees, from the bushes, from the shadows that no one had seen, wolves emerged. Not just the 7 domestic ones, but 2 entire packs of savages, 23 additional wolves that Tarak had, through weeks of patient work, convinced to defend the shared territory. 40 men against 11 humans and 30 wolves. The odds had changed dramatically. Brune's men retreated, murmuring. Some dropped their weapons. Wolves in small numbers were controllable. Wolves in a pack of 30, half wild and half working with humans, that was a nightmare. But Brune did not retreat. He roared and ordered an attack. What followed was not battle, it was controlled chaos. Tarak's humans did not engage in direct combat. They stayed behind, using spears from afar. The wolves did the dirty work, surrounding, distracting, biting ankles and calves, knocking men down in the snow. They did not kill. Tarak had given a clear order, wound, not kill. Because the dead created eternal vengeance. The wounded created legend. In 15 minutes, 10 of Brune's men were on the ground, wounded but alive. 15 others had fled. Only 15 remained, including Brune, surrounded by a circle of wolves and humans. Tarak approached, spear lowered but not threatening. It's over, Brune. You can go. Take your wounded and tell everyone what you saw here. Tell them that you tried to destroy a pack, and the pack taught you respect.
Brune, for the first time in his life, felt something new, genuine fear. Not fear of a human, fear of what that human had become, fear of something he didn't understand. "What are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I am Tarak," he replied calmly. "I was the last survivor. Then I was a hunter in the cave. Now," he looked around, at the wolves surrounding him, at Shadow beside him, at the humans following him. "Now I am something new. I am not the master of the wolves. I am not their slave. I am part of the pack, and the pack is part of me. We are one." Brune stepped back, gathered his wounded, and left. He never returned. And the news spread like wildfire. There was a man in the eastern lands who did not hunt beasts, who did not dominate them, who lived with them as equals. A man who could call wolves with a whistle, and they obeyed not out of fear, but out of choice. Tribes began to arrive, not to attack, but to learn. Tarak taught, but with the condition. It can't be slavery, it has to be respect. A wolf that is forced becomes an enemy. A wolf that is chosen becomes family. Over the months, the pack grew. 20 humans, 15 domestic wolves, and territory respected by 3 wild packs that, although they didn't live with them, protected the shared borders. Tarak had started alone, broken, without purpose. Now he was a leader. Not by force, by wisdom, by understanding something that no other human had understood. Power doesn't come from dominating, it comes from connecting. He wasn't a king, he wasn't a chief, he was something that didn't yet have a name, but that future generations would call Lord of the Beasts, not because he controlled, but because he understood, because he respected, because he knew that humans didn't survive by conquering nature,
but by becoming part of it. The journey was almost complete, and the legacy only beginning.